Hello there ladies and gentlemen, TX141 here, also known as Paul, welcoming you to 2015 and some all-new Ground Forces gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's episode I shall be fielding the Panzer Kampfwagen from Panther D on the break map Eastern Europe. To provide you with a quick historical overview of the Panther D, seeing as whilst I'm not reviewing the tank today, it is quite relevant to the context of this gameplay. The Panther was first introduced in the middle of 1943 to the German Panzer divisions, and it had two main qualities which made it a very effective tank platform for both taking out enemy tanks and supporting infantry. And these qualities were in the terms of firstly the armour profile. Whilst the side and rear armour varied between 45 and 60mm of thickness depending on the turret and hull sections, the frontal hull armour of this tank was an effective 100mm plate, thanks to an 80mm interlocked metal plate angled at 55 degrees. Additionally, the frontal armour of the turret was roughly 100mm thick, and the only weak spot on the front was due to the curvature of the manlet in the lower portion. This was known as the shot trap, whereby if a tank could fire a shell at this lower portion of the manlet, it had a good chance of being deflected down into the hull, thereby penetrating and knocking out the tank very easily. And this was a problem only rectified with the G variant of the Panther, thanks to a small plate being added in order to prevent the shot trap from occurring. Combine this armour profile with the second key trait of this tank, the Rheinmetall Borsig 75mm Kampfwagen Cannon L70, and you have yourself a deadly sniper platform. This 75mm is regarded as one of the best guns to be introduced during the course of the Second World War, comparable to the 88 L71. For some rather important characteristics, such as accuracy with distance and overall muzzle velocity. By comparison with the Tiger I Henschel's 88mm L56, this 75mm, thanks to its armour-piercing capped ballistic cap shells, was able to roughly go through 100mm of armour at a kilometre's distance, if not a little bit more. And this penetration stayed with the shell at even more distance, by comparison with the 76mm or the 85mm guns fielded on the American and Soviet opponents that the Panther was to face. This meant that the Panther could knock out a good portion of its foes at extended distances, well before its opponents could take it out, meaning that unless a T-34-85 could get well within the firing range of the Panther in order to knock it out, it had very great difficulty at taking the Panther out unless it was able to get a shot on the side or the rear armour. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I played the Ground Forces originally, for this one tank. The reason being, as you see there, whilst our accuracy is not great, and that is primarily due to the fact that our gunners' accuracy skills are very poor at the moment, when we hit a target at roughly 1.7 kilometers distance, i.e. that Sherman in the distance, we can go through the armour, whereas if they fire at us, they cannot return fire in such a calibre. And this even extends to the legendary tank of the Tiger I, whereby at a kilometre's distance they will be unable to penetrate our armour, whilst we are able to get through their effective 100mm plate on the frontal hull. And thanks to the overall mobility of the Panther as a medium tank, being able to obtain a top speed of I believe roughly 50 to 60 km an hour, although I am unsure of that, this makes the tank a very mobile sniper, and one that can always interchange its position on the battlefield as the battle progresses. Now of course, this gameplay is going to be rather slow, seeing as I have yet to move out of the spawn point, and I do not do so for the entire duration of this match. But I would like to think that all 69 of my armour piercing rounds, and I fire the vast majority of them in this game, having achieved my assist on that Sherman, go to good use in suppressing the enemy team as they come out of spawn. Seeing as this is what I wanted in War Thunder's Ground Forces, the ability to fight over incredibly long distances with the guns designed for such a task. Of course, there will be those of you saying right now that there is the Tiger II Henschel, or indeed the Tiger II with the Borsig turret and the 88 L71. Yet, what is a little bit disappointing in my opinion is that these tanks get matched up against, say, the Joseph Stalin IIIs. Tanks which I am aware that the Tiger II will be able to penetrate quite easily through the front if firing at the pike at the right angle, but at the same time I prefer to see it in the context of the Second World War, and so I will be holding out for the historical events, or the World War II Chronicles as they are now coined, when they become available. Nonetheless, we've digressed from the game here. As we can see, we're firing at a Tiger I Henschel at roughly a distance of 1.6 km, and at that distance we just cannot maintain the penetration on our shells in order to get through their effective 100mm plate. Right now we can penetrate roughly, if I remember correctly, 75mm of armour, which is ample for say a T-34 or indeed a Sherman. And so I am only gradually encroaching distance, or moving forward I should really say. The reason being, my opponents are stationary to some extent, and here I'm trying to drop a shell onto an enemy Sherman. As you can see, it falls a little bit short of the target, and so I'm trying to track them along the road. But very shortly, as I provide ample lead and get ready to fire, they stop in the midst of the trees. And my bit of advice for you, if you are trying to lead a target over extended distance, is wait until your opponent has built up their momentum, or built up their speed, and really demonstrated the fact they are going somewhere. As, much like with that Sherman, despite the fact I've now penetrated them through the lower portion of their manlet as well, if you fire too early, your opponent does have the ability to just stop. And this is one of the sort of coincidences, I would say, rather than lucky chances. The reason being, we all have the ability to make random movements. And my second shell goes right through on the right hand side of the frontal plate, detonating the ammo rack and therefore taking out the Sherman, allowing us to achieve our first kill for this game. Additional advice really, when playing at such distances in my opinion, is not to be discouraged when you miss. The reason being, my next shot goes straight through the front of a T-34-57 with its effective 45mm frontal plate, not being able to mitigate the penetration power of my 75mm shell at 1.5 kilometers. So we are straight away reining in the power of this tank, and it is extended further when I go through the front of another Sherman at 1.45 kilometers. And here I'm trying to get another round into my opponent. Moving forward after every shot, because I just want to get a little bit closer to my targets. I'm starting to feel that at roughly 1.3 to 1.5 kilometers, I've got a very good chance of actually hitting my opponents. Dropping a shell right through the frontal plate of the Sherman once again to set them on fire. That Tommy cooker is soon to blow, I reckon. We fire once more, deflecting off at the top of the frontal plate of the Sherman. Unfortunately, that's the variance with distance. And I'm still trying to lead a shot into my target. And I finally hit, once again, the frontal ammo rack and the driver to achieve my third kill. So we can see the lethality of the Panther's gun come into life here. Turning my armour fully to face the heavy tank at a distance, I try to drop a shell down into this KV-1, or what I reckon is to be a KV-1 by looking at it from this distance. Trying to track them along through the trees, I instead find my attention grabbed by an enemy Tiger, which I know I cannot penetrate at this distance, and then there's a self-propelled gun at roughly 1.41 kilometers. It turns out to be a ZIS-30 or ZIS-30, a gun with very little armour on its stable platform, meaning that I can easily go through the front if I'm instant on target. My first shell did a lot of damage, but I need one more to finish them off. And at 1.34 kilometers it is only a matter of time. I'm trying to get the shot onto target here, and I'm finding that I'm overshooting very slightly, so I drop my aim and fire once again. Unfortunately that shell misses, and because I've zoomed out I'm unable to tell where it has landed. But I know I'm hitting in the rough region, I just need to keep putting the shells in. Finally detonating the ZIS-30 to achieve my fourth kill. I then see this Tiger 1's aiming at me, and with their shell landing a little bit short, I return fire. We can see here that they are undamaged thanks to the fact my shell lands at the most oblique angle onto the very low frontal plate of the Tiger. But in a similar vein, I am aware of the fact that the Tiger is going to have a difficult time penetrating me or even hitting me at such a distance. Despite the raw firepower of the KwK L56, one of the most powerful guns available for knocking out Soviet and American tanks at the time of its conception. You can see in the distance a self-propelled gun. It turns out to be a Jagdpanzer IV, and unfortunately they are situated at an angle whereby they have a very good chance of deflecting the shells I fire at them. They are roughly at a 30 to 45 degree angle to myself at this point, meaning that I've got a very low chance of penetration even when I hit, as we can see by the tool lip in the top right of your screen. Instead I see another tank starting to make its way across the screen, and so I fire trying to drop the shell down onto the tank that's going to pass in front of the Jagdpanzer, to no avail. To this point I believe I've now got a Hetzer and an enemy Jagdpanzer to shoot at. I fire in another shell at the Jagdpanzer, but I'm just not hitting my target at this point. Nonetheless, I get an assist for the first round that did hit, and I see a medium tank gradually making its way down the hillside towards a friendly self-propelled gun. Instead of hitting my friendly or having a high chance of hitting my friendly indiscriminately, I decide to open fire once again at self-propelled gun on the right. I believe this is an enemy Hetzer, and at 1.34 kilometers, or roughly that distance, I'm having a bit of trouble finding out where my shell is going. I believe it's overshooting slightly, so I try to drop another shell onto target. I fire but nothing hits, and so I move a little bit further forward, with only 22 shells left to fire, and 10 high explosive ones if I feel the need to throw something at my opponents other than harsh language. Unfortunately, the Panther D does not have access to armour piercing composite rigid shells, although really it does not need them for the distances we're fighting at, as those shells would lose their penetration at such extended distances and have a similar damage and penetration profile to the armour piercing rounds, if not a weaker damage profile. Unfortunately, we just cannot lead this self-propelled gun enough at 1.27 kilometers. And as you're going to see very shortly, my frustrations take advantage of me, and I managed to finally land a shell into the backside track of the Hetzer, doing minimal damage, so I changed my attentions to a self-propelled gun. It turns out to be the Jagdpanzer from earlier, damaging their track partially, but nothing more, until a Tu-2 comes along and blows them sky high. At this point I see another self-propelled gun on top of a hill. I believe it's an anti-aircraft gun, or it may be a Stug actually. It is a Stug, and I miss once again. Yet here, I go to fire what is an anti-aircraft gun, and we're going to see the raw accuracy of the 75 come to life very shortly, whereby the only thing I can see of that anti-aircraft gun is literally the top of the truck that mounts it, i.e. the half-track. Yet my shell goes right through the top of the driver's slot, and takes them out for my 5th and final kill of this game. So we can see, whilst my accuracy is rather poor in the whole, this gun does have its vices and virtues that go hand in hand, hitting a Panther D KwK L and doing enough damage to accredit an assist to us. And I type into the chat here that I haven't moved all game, because if you look at the map, I've only moved roughly half a kilometre away from the spawn. And here I throw an unnecessary shell towards an enemy Wellington, just on the off chance I may be able to penetrate their wing, although I've yet to actually hit any aircraft with a tank or a land-based gun. Nonetheless, as I watch a friendly, what is a Ki-61, chase the Wellington, the game comes to its end, and it is time to look at some post-game stats. So, as we can see, our 5 kills and 2 assists allowed us to make the most of our 5 times bonus, allowing us to accrete 21,857 silver lions, but more importantly 5,735 research points, all going towards our research on the Stug 3 Ausf G. We hereby conclude this segment of the video by realising that when employed in the role it was designed for, the Panther is an absolutely deadly tank, seeing as whilst not every shell hit, and I had a very low percentage of hits on target by comparison with almost 60 shells fired. This tank, when the 75mm is accurate on target, has a very good chance of penetrating its opponents, even when they have sloped armour, which is able to deflect a lot of lower calibre or lower velocity shells at increased distance. The majority of my kills were made at roughly 1.3 kilometers outwards, and this in turn means that the Panther is a tank which, so long as you can keep your opponents at extended distance, is one that can sit out in the open with its frontal armour facing its foes, and deflect or absorb the shells, whilst giving back absolutely deadly firepower. And we are going to see our performance by comparison to the rest of our team is nothing spectacular very shortly, seeing as I stated in the chat, I barely moved all game, and I acted really more as a harassment/support role, sniping over towards the enemy spawn, and also harassing the targets which tried to break out along the left hand side or the right hand side of the hill on which our opponents spawned on. And that is why I enjoy maps such as Break, Eastern Europe, seeing as they're maps which will allow you to get the most out of the gun that you have at your hands, in the form of the Panther. And as we can see, we came 7th on our team, doing quite alright by comparison to the rest of our team, because we stayed in the back and provided the support where required, seeing as I would put my money on a lot of our opponents not actually realising where the shells were coming from at such an extended distance. And it'd be quite interesting to see the surprise when they get hit. And on the kill cam, it shows a 75mm shell coming from such an extended distance. You'd be amazed it finally hit its target. Nonetheless, it would now be worthwhile taking a look at the Panther D when it is placed into a situation it is less comfortable with, i.e. town fighting or close quarters combat. So in our second and final gameplay for today, we are on the domination map Poland, using the same setup as before in the same tank. For the purposes of this game, as you can see on the map right now, there is little room to actually get out to an extended distance. You can achieve roughly distances of 1 to 1.5 kilometers, but to do so means you have to expose yourself to the majority of the enemy fire from spawn. As you can see here, at the time of recording this, I was unaware of the fact that by pushing myself out on the very edge of the flanks, I would expose myself to the enemy spawn point. And for those who are unaware, firing into a spawn point is not ideal. A, you're going to have the majority of the concentration of enemy fire as soon as they are aware of your presence, and B, because your opponents have an invulnerability whilst in spawn for roughly 10 to 15 seconds, although that number is not exact, so do not quote me on it. As a result, I very soon realised that I'm actually going to have to head back into the fray, and I apologise for the poor frame rate here. I believe it's because the tree's been rendered in, and sometimes my PC has a little bit of difficulty putting the ground forces together at first. Nonetheless, with our frame rate now steadied out, let us carry on the main crux of the commentary. So as I push along, I see a friendly Su-85 just to the left of your screen right now, who has followed suit and trying to put themselves out on a flank whereby they can use their tank destroyer gun to greater effect, as the 85 at ranges of roughly 500 to 750 meters is quite effective even against the Panther's armour profile, so long as you are able to get the shot onto target either in the shot trap or if you can try and get it into the side armour. I'm not talking about the armour piercing composite rigid shells here, I'm talking about the armour piercing rounds that the tank mainly used. I can see an enemy Panzer IV Ausf to F2 in the distance. It's behind the balustrade iron bars of that house, but unfortunately I just cannot get the shot onto target. So at this point I press forward, and as you're going to see very shortly, I press forward a little bit too far and put myself and my Panther in probably the worst situation I could get myself into. I start off by firing a shell at a Stug 3 Ausf G, and I soon realise that that tank is coming out of its spawn point, and as I look to my left, there appears to be an enemy Panther, with its turret and side armour facing me. So I put a shell right through the side of the turret, allowing me to kill off the commander and the loader. Whilst my reload time of 10 seconds is rather long by comparison with most, I'm able to put another shell in to kill the gunner, and I absorb a shell into my frontal armour, which I'm unsure of where it actually came from. So I continue my barrage on the Panther, and my third shell knocks them out, thanks to the fact it takes out the cannon barrel and therefore makes the tank completely ineffective. At this point I reverse behind the house, and for the majority of this game I am going to be stuck behind this little house right here, so I'm grateful to the owners for allowing me to park myself behind it. Yet, comical digression aside, as I reverse away, and the very low reverse speed of the Panther means you're not going to be reversing very far very quickly, I take a shell on the side, and as soon as I use my fire extinguishers to put it out, I realise it's come from a menace. It's a Tiger 1H, but we put a shell right through the frontal side armour, allowing us to detonate their ammo rack, which is based in the side of the tank, and achieve our second kill. A little bit over aggressive I must admit, but quite satisfying nonetheless. As we can see, at closer ranges, both the gun off of the Tiger 1 and indeed the gun off the Panther can penetrate to roughly the same armour profiles. Add 10mm of penetration onto the Tiger's penetration values and you've got the Panther's gun in a nutshell. So here I'm confronted with a Tiger once again, although the driver seems to be a little bit unaware of my presence. I put a shell through the frontal hull plate, killing off I believe the driver, yet now the Tiger is looking at me. So I use a technique which I recall from World of Tanks if I remember rightly, side scraping. Although fortunately for myself the Tiger fired so early that they only just made to graze the shell off my armour. I put a shell through the machine gun port which allows me to set the forward transmission of the Tiger on fire. And at this point, as another pair of enemy tanks come round from the street from earlier, I put a shell straight through the front of what I believe is a Panther 4, and the shell also carries through to the Stug behind it, doing minimal damage to the Stug. Having reloaded my shell, I fire on this enemy M6A1, the American heavy tank which mounted a 90mm if I remember correctly. Well, that may have been a 76 but a 90mm experimental, so don't quote me on that. With the M6A1 burning and not looking towards me, I see an enemy self-propelled gun in the distance, and with the Tiger going past me as a flaming wreck, I realise that it's an SU-85 that's actually been knocked out of the game. So here, I'm sandwiched between a rock and a hard place, i.e. the house and the guns of my opponents. I fire a very rushed shell at this T-34-92, which deflects off of their frontal plate, and we can see here that due to the smaller distances, even the guns with lower penetration values start to have greater effect on me. And this is where the armour of the Panther falls short, seeing as I cannot implement its overall profile and thickness with decreasing distance. It means that exchanges such as the one with this T-34-9042 with 76mm become a little bit more rough, although I managed to put a shell straight through on the ammo rack and detonate them for my 4th kill. At this point I reverse back around the house once again, because I'm trying to essentially creep away, but I realise that no matter what I do at this point, as soon as I reverse far enough away from the house, I've got a very high likelihood of being shot to pieces, seeing as I will not have the distance to make my armour work to my advantage. I fire a shell at an enemy KV-1B here, but as you can see, due to the fact they've just spawned in, the shell passes straight through them. However, this enemy Sherman, sitting around, once again absorbs the shell because they have not left spawn. At this point I see another Panzer KwK 6 Tiger, and I try to replicate my shot on the ammo rack from earlier, firing directly to the right hand side of the frontal plate. Yet as you can see, the shell only partially made its way in, doing minimal damage. So I managed to side scrape a shell off of my side armour, I believe that's how it's coined, and I aim for the driver's slip, taking out the driver and doing nothing major. Again I absorb a shell into my side, yet I've got another Tiger now even closer trying to fire at me, so things are becoming a little bit difficult. I take some engine damage at this point, because I'm starting to lose some of the armour on the side, as I aim at the driver's port and kill off the driver of another Tiger. I'm getting quite good at this, I reckon. The Tiger fires back, grazing the shell off the side, and so I try to put the shell right in underneath where the turret joins with the hull, i.e. the turret ring, and it goes right in for my 5th kill. Yet at this point I am flanked by a T-34-1942. I put out the fire, absorb another shell, yet fortunately for myself, due to my overall armour thickness and the strength of my modules within this tank, I am able to tank another 76mm and make it through for my 6th kill. At this point the KV-1B comes around to fire at me, and I put my shell right through the turret ring, killing off the loader, the gunner and taking out the horizontal turret drive. The KV-1B continues to move forward very gradually and does not really press a major advantage, being knocked out by a friendly KV-1, as I say thank you, and allowing me to just look back and reflect on what I've had to do and what I've been able to do. I look down the street once again where all the enemy tanks used to come from and realise there are none left, and as the game comes to its close, I believe at this point I actually started swearing at my screen, not in the chat, but in amazement at the fact that the Panther was able to take so much in such a small area, and my engine did not catch fire enough in order to cause the ammo to explode. Nonetheless, let us take a look at some more post-game stats. So, as we can see, our 6 kills and 3 assists allowed us to net 25,483 silver lions, an additional 1,242 research points, all carrying through to our research on the Stug 3 Ausf G. We hereby conclude that gameplay by realising that whilst the Panther is not optimised for close range engagements, you are still able to take quite a bit of damage, so long as you make use of the surrounding terrain. I was quite fortunate to have both opponents who did not try to rush me to a large extent, bar the T-34 1942 with 76 F-34 76mm cannon, and the KV-1B. If I had been rushed by, say, the pair of tigers from earlier, and they had not continued to try and fire into the rear of my side armour at such an extended angle of approximately 80 degrees off of the normal, then the situation would have ended up much more differently. Yet fortunately I was able to use the house as a means of deflecting the shots away from myself, bouncing a good portion of shells off of the very extended side armour of my tank. And that meant that when I was able to fire back, so long as I aimed for key components such as turret rings, driver's hatches or ammo racks, as depicted on the majority of the opponents I fired at, by the T-34 where I fired indiscriminately into the frontal plate at roughly 50 metres distance, or even less than that, we were able to take our opponents out rather quickly, even if we needed more than one shell. Despite the reload time on the Panther being rather extended, and meaning that you fire at roughly a rate of 6 rounds per minute, you are still able to keep the fire down even in those close quarters engagements. And this enabled me to come first on my team, yet I must be honest I could not have done it without the support of both the Su-85 and the KV-1 that was sitting well behind me during the course of the game. They contributed to my assists and also enabled me to stay in the fight for a longer period of time, and they may have been the reason why the two tigers did not pressure me and try to flank round on me. Nonetheless, that was a game which I really panicked about at the time, but now that I look back on it I can laugh and say that that is why I love the Panther so much. And so if you have enjoyed this video, why not give it a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder Ground Forces gameplays on my channel. Yet until next time ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies.